Hello, and welcome to Corpse Club. It has been such a very long time since we've gotten together that I have forgotten how to do an intro, so I've decided to do it real sexy like. I am your co host, Bryan Christopher. With me, as always, or some of the time, or I've already messed up this intro, but I'm going to keep on going anyway. Scott, smooth as silk Drebit. How are you doing, Scott?
Oh, thanks for putting it on me, Brian. I am going down smoother than a chocolate malt on a summer day. How about you, D-Dog?
Ooh, I'm coming at you hot and steamy on this hot summer day. I'm going to melt some ice cream and then eat it like soup. That's how cool I am today.
That was the most unwholesome thing I have ever heard.
Steaming.
Oh, no.
Give me some of that steaming chocolate, would you?
What's not sexy about melted ice cream, I ask you?
Well, I mean, I know you do it a little differently in the Midwest. So, welcome everybody. We have already started off on a shit show, but we are back together. It's me, Bryan Christopher. It's Scott Drebit. It's Derek Anderson, and we are still in the middle of this strike. The WGA and SAG-AFTRA continue to strike because studios are greedy a-holes, and I'm glad that they're sticking to their guns. Like, I know we're going to see a lot of movie and TV delays, but that's on the studios. That is not on the people who are trying to do the work. So with that in mind, we are still really trying to avoid covering new movies in support of the ongoing strikes. So we've been thinking like we're willing to do older movies and we can do like newer books and things like that. And it just so happens that one of our very own team members has written a new book about old movies, and that is Mr. Scott Drebit. He has a book coming out, exact date to be determined, but sometime this fall from McFarland Press, called A Cut Below, a celebration of B horror movies, 1950s to 1980s. I am so damn excited for this book. McFarland, you need to please get this thing on the shelves so that I can have it in my hands. Scott, you
Yes,
want to
sir.
give us a little bit of a synopsis? What is this thing about?
No, that is, you don't need to know nothing more, buddy.
Cool. Cool. Then we want to thank Bryan, our engineer, for helping us out each and every episode.
Okay, all right. So essentially, what the book is it is as the subtitle, a celebration of B horror movies states, that precisely is what it is. It's a celebration of this genre that we love so much. And you know, when you say B horror, well, you know, 90% of horror is B horror, right? So that's where we live, and that's you know, where we love. So what I've done with the book is I just wanted to do something that was a little lighter. I'm a big fan of reference books. I'm a big fan of horror analysis books. I wanted to come at it maybe from a little lighter kind of an angle. So I thought I would come up with these kind of, I just made up some festivals so I could group some like-minded films together from across from the 50s to the 80s. You know, so it is interesting to see when you look at a category and see how similar material plays in different decades. So yeah, like I said, it's a look at 60 movies from the 50s to the 80s that I personally love, or else, you know, really, really like. But I think they're movies that deserve a fair shake. Some of them have gotten them. Some of them have not received what I think would be a fair shake. But I've always loved these kinds of books. So it was only natural for me to gravitate towards doing this kind of thing. for my first book.
And I've gotten to sample this book, and it is, if you get the chance, pick it up because it is so much fun. I cannot wait again to get a copy in my hands. And so while we're waiting, however, we are going to do kind of a little bit of our own, I guess, our own drive-in programming based off of Scott's book. And we are going to do a lineup of 5 movies from A Cut Below. I am not nearly as creative as Scott in terms of how to frame these things, so we're just going to do it in chronological order. So yeah, we're going to chat some old movies and hopefully wet your whistle a little bit for when this book comes out, a little hopefully later this year. So we're going to start 1981. We are going to start in Scott's native-owned Canada, and we're going to start with George Mihalka's My Bloody Valentine. So
Yeah,
I mean,
this is a fun one.
Derek, this was your pick, so why don't you kick us off? Talk us through this one a little bit.
Yeah, I think, well, you nailed it right on the head with the Canada reference, because if you're a longtime Corpse Club listener, you know that Scott is from the Great White North. He hails from a very, I think, still kind of an unsung horror corner of the horror world, because there's been so many great horror movies from Canada, especially if you go back to the 80s and the 70s. I think there's always been like this very much DIY approach, like, let's go make a movie. And I just feel like that's what I think of when I think of like Canadian horror. Like, let's grab a camera, go in the woods and make a horror movie. And I really like My Bloody Valentine, though, for a lot of different reasons. And I was so happy to see this. It is in Festival 7 in A Cut Below, the Back Bacon Bloodbath marathon that Scott has put together, which I just love that name. Makes me hungry for bacon. And which I'm assuming would be served instead of popcorn at this festival. But
you can do both.
Oh, perfect. Okay. So as long as it doesn't attract the bear from Grizzly, and because otherwise we're going to need Christopher George there. And, so anyway, but I love My Bloody Valentine. I think primarily for the setting. It just gives me like this it's like comfort food watching this town of Valentine Bluffs, and like how much they actually like really get into the holiday of Valentine's Day. And it's kind of like their Christmas, like in a Hallmark movie, they just go all out for it. And so I actually just love like spending time with the characters and just the whole tone that the movie sets. But then on top of that, like the kills really go hard. And it's like, it's such a great, like unforgiving slasher that, especially if you watch like the unrated cut, that it's such a great contrast. And it's hard to watch some of those characters die, but it's a lot of fun, and it has a great theme song too. So I'm really glad that you highlighted this one in your book, Scott.
Well, thank you. And you know what, for me, what stands out right off the top is you mentioning that the special edition, and when they put back in a lot of those gore effects, that had been, let me see, this came out in 81. So, that had been like 20 years or longer, where we just had the cut that we had, the R-rated cut, right? That we got. The movie is so strong that when they added that stuff back in, as cool as it is, and when it was put back in properly, it actually plays really well. But it ended up feeling like extra, like it wasn't necessary, and I think it's because the movie the movie doesn't need that extra gore to really hit. As you said, Derek, we get to spend time with these characters, and that can mean a matter of a few extra minutes, of screen time, and that's all it can take, right, to elevate a slasher movie like this. Oh yeah, it's one of, since I saw it when I was 11 on Vidya tape. I've always been a huge fan of it.
And it's so brutal. Like it comes out swinging so hard with that first kill, where like, and it's kind of oddly surreal, where you have the woman doing a strip tease, and then the miner just like impales her on the pickaxe. It is letting you know what you're in for, and it doesn't get any better than that. Like, I mean, it doesn't get any, it doesn't ease up from there either. You know, some movies will grab you with something really interesting, and then kind of go downhill from there. I mean, like this poor woman that gets stuck into a dryer in a laundromat and is just like heart ripped out. Like it's so mean. It's such a mean movie.
It really is.
Yeah. No, it really is vicious, but it reminds me too of it seems every slasher around this time, their biggest red herring, and it stems from Halloween, right? It was the red herring would always be the killer from 10 years ago, 15 years ago has escaped from the prison, but he's not the one who's actually doing the killing. Right. You know what I'm saying? Yep. It's someone else. And this is your red herring that the police are chasing around for. Well, this movie has it, right? This movie has the Harry Ward, and they're trying to, for the love of Christ, no one can figure out what the fuck happened to Harry Ward. And they're making phone calls, and they're driving here and driving there. And no, the files are missing and the place burnt down or whatever. It's like The Omen or something, right? Trying to find out who the hell Damien is. Just trying to find out what the hell happened to Harry Warden.
Have you seen this boy? Have you seen this jackal?
I mean, let's not get ahead of ourselves. It's not the Deer Hunter here. This isn't, Michael Cimino. It's still a goofy ass slasher movie, even if the characters are a little more grounded and a little more down to earth. But man, that sheriff and the mayor with the pipe, you chasing these leads looking for Harry all over the place. It's the comic relief of the movie, even though I don't think it's intentional, but there we are.
Like who do you think is more incompetent in terms of spotting the actual threat in their town? The sheriff from Valentine Bluffs, or everybody in Haddonfield and Halloween Kills, who are dead convinced that this poor harrowed, just like
4'8".
Yeah, he's like about as tall as a fire hydrant. He barely knows where he is, but everybody is convinced that this is Michael Myers.
That'd be cowering.
The mob mentality.
That's right. I didn't say towering. I said the cowering.
Evil cowers tonight.
Oh
yeah, it is, and I'm kind of surprised that we didn't get like 4 or 5 sequels for My Bloody Valentine. Like we got the remake in 2009, which I also enjoy that one too. But it is kind of funny how especially when it came out, that we didn't get, because they kind of leave the door open too. It's not a definitive, okay, you killed him, everything's done. It's still kind of like, well, if you wanted to go back, or maybe the mine connects to Haddonfield or something, I don't know.
Well, it doesn't look like this one really blew up the box office. It was a $2.3 million budget. It made 5.7, which is a bit of a profit, but I guess maybe it wasn't enough that they were looking for at the time, in 1981, when you've got a couple of Friday the 13th out, or at least one. I don't know if the second one was out by 81 yet or not, but maybe it just wasn't.
Yeah, Paramount. Listen, Paramount was they were embarrassed by Friday the 13th as it was, so I don't think they're probably like, okay, we can just stick with the Friday the 13th, so we don't have to have another, another franchise. Yeah, another franchise, right? Because they were Friday the 13th was like their, the redheaded stepchild for them. Yeah, it was great. And made the money, but they were so embarrassed to be in that kind of business with their storied history. But
the last thing they wanted was to bring it in from Canada. We're not importing our shame now. We'll at least have it be homegrown.
Now that's cinema.
Well, speaking of imports, for our next movie, we are going to go from Canada to Italy, where
Oh,
we are going to be still in 1981. And maybe my favorite movie out of like the sleazy kind of undead early 80s Italy era,
yeah, tracks.
Andrea Bianchi's Burial Ground. This movie is all the way insane. This is just cuckoo bananas. Like there is not a single frame of this movie that isn't just the oddest thing you'll ever see on celluloid. And it's a very basic premise. It's, I think we open it up with some kind of a doctor or like scholar or something like that stumbling on the sacred words that raise the dead on this old Italian plot. And it just so happens that like three jet-setting couples happen to be going to that mansion at the same time, and chaos ensues. And like the amount of chaos is not commiserate with any zombie movie I've ever seen in my life. Like, where do we even start? Like, do we start with the 30-year-old, 6-year-old boy, or like what? Like that's the elephant in the room, right?
It's the smallest elephant in the room. Yeah.
So for those who are unfamiliar with this movie, one of the characters is a small boy with a severe Oedipal complex for his mother.
Mm-hmm.
But they cast what is probably like, I don't know, a 6 or 7-year-old boy, like the character, with a man who's got to be at least in his 30s, if not.
No, he was like mid-20s.
Mid-20s. That's
Yeah.
what I said. At least in mid-20s. And it is very, there's like an uncanny valley about the way he appears. And then like another even weirder layer is that if you're watching the dub version, they dub the little boy's voice with a mid-20s man. So like the dubbing is still with an old man pretending to be a little kid. Why? Like I don't know, and maybe you know enough about the production, Scott. Like, was this because of some of the things that play out in this movie? Did they feel like they had to have it be an adult?
Absolutely.
Okay.
150%. And until home video bloomed and we started getting some of these gems across the pond from Italy, put out by, God bless you, like your Anchor Bays, and what have you, right? That kind of pushed all these reissues, right? Even though it was videotape when Anchor Bay was pushing it at first there. If it wasn't for that, we'd never know the beauty of seeing a 26-year-old man sucking on his mom's tit and then ripping it off with his mouth because he's a zombie. It's sorry, it's over 40 years old. Like yeah, it's and like you said, Wordy, well, okay, let's start there.
Actually,
there's a lot of carnage.
I feel like it's both a spoiler alert and a trigger warning at the same time. Like that, it's that
like
scene,
this is what you're getting into.
That scene.
And yeah, less disturbing. Then another one that's in the book, The Baby, I find more disturbing than what's going on here.
But yeah, this is like it's one of those movies. I feel like if you didn't know any better, you'd think it was like a Fulci, but I don't know. I think this even goes a little weirder than Fulci in some ways.
And that's saying something. And it's in the festival. If you're undead and you know it, clap your hand, which is I love that title for this marathon. And The Baby is in What the Film.
That's right.
The festival. So Which I feel like this one could also be categorized in that category. If it didn't have the zombie element, it probably would be in
It
that
could,
other
it
festival.
could. I mean, there honestly a lot of the films that we talk about could slot into, you know, 3 or 4 of the festivals, I think, in the book, just because I mean the successful ones that have elements of different things, you know, the ones that are a little harder to pin down, you know, those are kind of the ones that you want to try to grab a hold of and highlight, you know, and again, that's kind of what I'm trying to do with the book, right? Is kind of corral some of these movies into one place so people can, you know, program their own kind of drive-in festival, as it were.
Especially with zombie movies too, with the ones that you chose where you're going international with it and you're getting the Italian horror in there, because I think, you know, it's stuff that people might not come to mind immediately, because of course you have like Romero's awesome zombie films, but there's a lot of other ones that kind of get lost in the shuffle, or they're just so bizarre that they maybe just don't get, you know, the recognition they deserve. But it's cool. It's like it's kind of an alternative zombie festival that you've curated here. So
Well, I think I think all of these titles are to like the horror fan who's been around for a bit will be as familiar as pie to those people. But I've always, even with my articles with Daily Dead, the drive-in dust-offs, is I'm trying to reach out to the new horror fan foremost, right? To show them, just give them some examples of some different kinds of cool horror, right? And hopefully just kind of sets them on their way to making some interesting choices. And for the more seasoned horror fan, I just hope they, you know, appreciate my my takes on it with good humor. And if you don't agree with it, well, you know, up yours.
Well, and I honestly, I think there's
I kid. Everyone knows me. I kid.
I think there is something to be said about making sure that movies like this continue to get archived and like put to paper, because you know, we don't have that. The way streaming works is they're pushing the newer stuff and they're pushing the stuff that's come out now, and like more and more, we're not even seeing the old stuff. Like it's harder and harder to find this stuff. Like we don't have that same experience of wandering the video store where like you only have so many choices, so you might need to start digging back into the back catalog because all the new stuff has already been seen. We don't have that same that as prevalent of drive-ins where you know you just go and whatever they're playing. You know, you have so much choice and there's just so much content now that you know we do risk forgetting about the older stuff. And so you know books like this help document that and kind of keep it in the public pop culture consciousness.
Yeah. I mean, I wish I had more of, you know, an altruistic reasoning for doing the book, but
Oh no, you're an attention whore, but that doesn't mean
well,
that there's not good to come out of the fact that you've documented this as well.
yes, and if I may, yes, and the attention whore part. I mean, that's primarily it. You forgetting selfishness is also a big part of it too. From the time I started doing the drive-in dust-offs column, I wanted to make a book. I wanted to do a book. That was my goal. So here we are, and we're doing it, and it's very cool. But yeah, no, you know, it's just something that I've wanted to do for a very, very long time. So, and it's a very, very long process. To everyone out there who's doing it, stick with it. It's long, but I think it's going to be cool. when it happens.
Absolutely.
It's going to be cool.
Oh yeah.
Well, with that, let us move on to movie number 3. We're into 1982. Wow, we're really staying in the early 80s in this stretch of movies. 1982, we're going with a real deep cut from a couple of filmmakers and writers that you might not be familiar with. Director George A. Romero, and I believe his name is Stephen King.
Stefan, yes.
Stephen King. No, Stephen King, George Romero's Creepshow. Their homage to the EC horror comics of the 1950s. So this is our touch point back to the 50s for this episode. This is a classic. I mean, I'm sure most people have at least heard of this one, if not through the movie, then one of its many sequels or the TV series that's on Shudder. But I don't know. It's so much fun, and it's so much fun to talk about. Like, it's so jam packed. I don't know of many anthology movies that have a full 5 stories in there, and it's like 2 hours long. Like, they take their time with all of these, and they all get their due screen time. So the 5 stories. Father's Day, we got the rich family, bad dancing from Ed Harris, and decapitations with gravestones.
Don't let go. Don't let go.
We've got the lonesome death of Jordy Verrill, the comedy that turns into kind of actually a pretty meaningful tragedy by the end of it, with none other than Stephen King playing the poor Jordy Verrill, who gets, I would say, contaminated by a comet that covers everything in like this green mossy grass. Something That Tied You Over, an absolute banger with Leslie Nielsen, Ted Danson. Leslie Nielsen kind of leaning into that bad guy role that we first see in Day of the Animals.
Hot Shot.
Yep. He is the scorned lover who decides to make an example out of Ted Danson and his wife in a very creative and really sinister way involving the tides. We've got The Crate, a straight up creature feature, along with a little bit of I don't know, what do you want to call that? Family drama going on. And then They're Creeping Up on You, which is just a shitload of cockroaches. So, Derek, what's your favorite of these?
That is a really good question. I feel like it's changed depending on when I've watched it at different points in my life. I feel like I've always kind of liked Father's Day just because it's so EC Comics. It really it's got that, and it has, like you mentioned, it has time to build up. It really works its way towards that great, freeze frame final shot, and just the way things happen. The death scene in the graveyard with the tombstone, I think, is such a great moment of tension. But then you also have, like you mentioned, the dancing. You got some fun elements in there. You've got some really dark gallows humor. Although I would say Something to Tide You Over is a close second, just because of the ensemble and in that one, and just how great Leslie Nielsen is. So I would say that's my 1-2 currently. But if you're saying which one creeps me out the most, though, it's got to be the cockroaches. I mean, that's just, especially because they're not CG, they're not, prosthetics. They're like real cockroaches, a lot of them. And
yeah, would they have like 500,000 cockroaches on set for that? Like, it was a lot of cockroaches.
Like, there's no way that some of those aren't still out there somewhere. Like they're I mean, wherever they, ended up after filming was over.
Check your food processor.
Oh no, it's not Snowpiercer, is it? The Snowpiercer special.
How about you, Mr. Drebit? What's your favorite segment?
Oh, something to the tide over. Oh yeah, absolutely. It's like you said, you have that lip smacking Leslie Nielsen performance, and it's just, for me, it's the story that captures the spirit of EC comics the best. The horrifyingly creative death and then a great zombie comeuppance, simple, pure, but creative and fun. But there really isn't a weak link, I don't think, for me in Creepshow. I'm even a fan of good old Jody Verrill myself. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's
Jody Verrill.
Jordy. Yeah.
Jordy.
Yep.
Son of a.
The R is silent.
That's what it is.
He spells it right in the book, folks. I promise.
What are you gonna
I'll
do?
be right back. I just got to go send
I'm going off
email.
script here. I'm trying to pull it up, but it's not working. So whatever.
I have
a lot of words. Okay.
I have a very distinct memory of stumbling on this movie when I was like, I don't know, 10, 11 years old, and something that tied you over. Like it's my favorite too. And I just remember it really capturing my imagination because it was the first time I saw horror that blended horror and comedy the way this one did. Usually when you see a horror comedy, usually they'll lean more towards the comedy. They're trying to make it more palatable. This is like, it is so surreal. And, the comic book visuals that they give, a lot of it takes place in the daytime. It's such a contrast to what you get used to when it comes to how to make a horror movie or horror segment in this case, that it just, some of the visuals, the Ted Danson being completely underwater, and you just kind of see that perfect quaff like floating above his head.
Yeah,
it's backlit. It looks ridiculous, but it's also like it's also kind of beautiful.
It's a comic strip,
and it's so horrifying.
Mm-hmm.
And it just works so well because they lean into that kind of surreal comic book feel. But yeah, I agree, Scott. Though Jordy Verrill packs a wallop. It starts off so goofy, and it's just such this silly premise. And this is another one where you think it's just going to be like this goofy laugh, and at the end of it, like you feel so bad for this guy who just like he wanted his moment, and it completely goes sideways for him, and by the end of it, he's killing himself. It's so, and then like on top of that, it looks like the Earth might be following in short order. So it ends on a really dark note.
Yeah, that one was the one that I think I appreciate it more because I was for me, that one always stuck out like, oh, that's just so different than the others when I first saw this. And funnily enough, the first time I watched Creepshow, I'd found it like in a bargain bin at a Big Lots for like $3.99 on DVD, and I ended up that was my introduction to Creepshow, was at a Big Lots. But yeah, now when I watch it, it's like, oh wow, that's it. Actually, there's something like it just resonates with you. It once you settle into it and that character, like you say, it's just there's like just a total like loss of hope in that story that is, yeah, you're right. It goes from like this kind of quirky comedy to like, holy crap, that's really intense and dark, and and it's Stephen King too, so he's like playing this character, and yeah, he pulls it off. And I can imagine too the fuzzy green prosthetics that he's wearing were not, I imagine that was quite the ordeal to be having that all over your face and your body by the end of it. So
you can feel the itchiness, like the scene where he's trying to like he's trying to.
But it's like at the end, it's like watching a Muppet, kill itself.
Yeah.
It's
so
kind
sad.
of like, it is.
So
It's just sad. It's like, oh,
yeah.
Poor Jordy Muppet.
So why don't we lighten things up a little bit? We'll go from
I'm kind of bummed out.
Let's go to John Carpenter's contemplation on
there we go.
on Satan as a cylinder of green gaseous goo.
There's your Friday night laugh fest on ABC right there. There we go.
We are talking
movie of the week.
We were talking 1987's Prince of Darkness. This is one of the last, or like the later Carpenter entries that I had seen.
Such a bummer, this movie. Disney
It
Channel's
really is.
Prince of Darkness.
Yeah.
Sounds like a fairy tale.
It's so weird. It's so all over the place, but it's that Carpenter thing where, again, I don't know that it did super well. Like, it made $14 million off of a $3 million budget, but I don't know that it necessarily, like, rock the pop culture subconscious at the time. But as with all of his stuff, it has gone on to get more and more appreciation. And this was one that I wanted to talk about because, like, I've never gotten a chance to talk about this one, and it's so weird and it's so interesting. And also, I love that a few different actors from my favorite Carpenter movie, Big Trouble in Little China, pop up here. We get Victor Wong, who from Big Trouble in Little China was Egg Shen. Here he plays Professor. And then we have Dennis Dunn, aka Wang, who plays Walter Fong. And this is another one of those ones that, like, almost defies synopsis, but it's essentially, we are following a group of kind of academics, and specifically a quantum physicist, Victor Wong's character, who learn that, like, they stumble on this mysterious cylinder containing a swirling green liquid that turns out to be Satan. Like, it's it plays with this idea of, like, we personify and anthropomorphize evil. What if it's not like a person, it's just like a thing. And that's what we get here. And as they uncover, or they kind of pull this stuff out of hiding, stuff starts to get a little wonky. I don't know, I guess the biggest thing that people probably remember from this is Alice Cooper as, like, a group of homeless people that just, like, go absolutely apeshit and surround the this kind of turns into, I don't know, what is it, like a assault on precinct 13, but with Satan instead of criminals.
All of the evil comes out, like the bugs and the homeless. It's like that.
Yeah,
that's one of the ones where that's the only thing in the movie where I did, like, kind of a dog head tilt, like, so you're equating evil with homelessness?
Yeah, it's a little weird.
I don't know about that, but anyway, John, go on. You were saying still kick ass.
Well, where does this one sit for you guys in, like, the pantheon of the Carpenter filmography?
For me, it's every year it's kind of gone up and up, and it's definitely, I would put it in my top 3 of Carpenter's, probably.
Right.
Yeah, definitely.
Very interesting.
Definitely top 5. I mean, when I think of my top 8, it's there. No, it is high.
Is this a bit where every time you say it, it's going to be okay? Like, my top 10, definitely my top. Definitely my top 15.
It was. I'll tell you what. When it first came out, I went and saw it with my sister-in-law, Steph, and I didn't think much of it. It was a shoulder shrug for me when it was over. I was underwhelmed, is, I think, the word I even use in the book is underwhelmed. And again, that's the wonderful thing about the movies, is we can always, that relationship is always open, right? As long as you keep it open. The movie's always left it open. It's up to you to come back to the movie if you want to, expand on that relationship with the movie. Right. And that was definitely one where, when it came out on video, that I rewatched, and immediately on, I think, like, the second viewing, when I watched it at home, and I went, yeah, no, of course, this is great. Like, I don't know what was wrong with me at the time. I don't know what I honestly, I don't know what I was expecting when I went in to see it, because it wasn't a movie that was even like really on my radar. I don't even think I was up with Fangoria at the moment. So it was just like, boom, new John Carpenter. Oh, cool, let's go. So I didn't really know what to expect, but like I said, that first viewing, underwhelmed. Ever since then, the just the it's kind of like this streamlined. It's like My Dinner with Andre meets The Thing or something like that, meets Quatermass. Like it's got so many ideas to it, and I'm not sure that it pulls them all off, and it becomes just the back end of it becomes kind of a siege movie a la Night of the Living Dead or Assault on Precinct 13, but it still carries such a mood to it throughout that's sustained, that hauls it all the way through. And it's just, yeah, it's like top 3 for sure.
Yeah, I think one of the more contemplative of John Carpenter's movies. Like, and they're all like, a lot of his stuff is, in its own way cerebral, but this one I think is just, it's all about introducing ideas.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. There's something different about there's just a lot going on here. There's a lot to think about. But there's also a lot of visceral horror too, and the imagery at times is very in your face, and well, quite literally with the one character's face just being like
poor
gone.
Kelly when she fully like inhabits like anti-god, is her face shows it very much so.
And it's very restrained, but also not. But yeah, I feel like I kind of came to this one late too. Like, this to me was almost like a forgotten John Carpenter movie that you'd like find in an attic somewhere. Like, what is this? Like, because I just never really heard it get talked about until like Scream Factory kind of shed a light on it, and then it had this resurgence. But it was kind of one of those things where it felt like stumbling on something like, oh, this is really cool, and like, this deserves to be talked about just as much as like, some of his other stuff, like They Live or The Thing. And I think it has just such a great rhythm to it. Like, it really doesn't let up. It just keeps going and going and going. And it just, I don't know, it really, I think it gets under your skin more than some of his other films, just in its approach to the horror, and kind of like In the Mouth of Madness as well, where it's just this very like, there's just a lot going on, and some of it's psychological, some of it's visceral, but it's all very terrifying. So I think it's one of those that I definitely want to keep rewatching it. It's one of the movies I'm most excited to rewatch, because I feel like every time I watch it, I'm going to come away with something different. Mm-hmm. And as you mentioned too, with the cast, it like Donald Pleasance and all these other actors, it's kind of like he got together with all of his friends and said, let's go make a movie. And there's this kind of freedom to it, creative freedom to it. That's kind of refreshing. So I think it's kind of Carpenter, like unrestrained, like that's kind of cool. Let's do this and follow this for a little bit.
Yeah, he's very much doing what he wants to do in this, as opposed to trying to make something that's going to be like, another mainstream success.
Mm-hmm. And maybe is that Scott, why this ended up in your potluck of horror film festival in your book, is just because it's got
this ended up again for the same reason that Bryan wanted to talk about it tonight, was because he's never had a chance to talk about it. I've never had a chance to write about it. Self-imposed. I only have done one previous write-up on Carpenter, and that was when I did Halloween for my 100th drive-in dust-off. Other than that, I've stayed away from Carpenter, just like I've done, the first Phantasm, and that's it. It's just, there's some people's catalogs I don't want to, and they're the more well known. And I was shooting with the column, something on the more obscure side. So it was kind of like, well, Carpenter's like, that's as big as you get. So for the most part, I stayed away from him. So Pollock of Horror is just very selfishly, those are all movies that I've always wanted to write about. And for one reason or another, I never have had a chance to. And so there they are.
And a delicious potluck it is.
And it's
delectable.
It's good for you too.
Not quite as delectable as ice cream soup, but it's up there.
That's right.
And speaking of food, we're going to get into our last movie, just peeking into the 1990s with 1991's Mark Harrier's Popcorn. Derek, this one was yours. Why don't you introduce us to this one?
Yeah, this is one. I think half the reason, just thinking about it, is that I chose it is because it's actually a 90s horror movie, and it's in Scott's book, and I'm like, oh man, there's some Scott's giving some love to some 90s horror. I have to include this.
Well, just one.
Yeah, for those who know Scott's like contentious relationship with the 1990s,
contentious.
It is
dramatic.
It is. I'm the host here. It is amazing that he included a 90s movie, but then also not terribly surprising that he did not address the 90s in the title of his book. Like he just snuck one in there.
It's in the book. I address it in the book.
Yeah, but I mean, this is a celebration of horror movies from the 1950s to the 80s, and you're just like, and maybe a 91 in there too.
It's in that plus or minus sweet spot, you know. It's there might be a late 40s movie in there too. I'm
sure they first got the idea of it in the 1980s, so it still counts.
Right, exactly. Well, and it's funny because this feels like the most non-90s horror movie ever made because Scott, as you mentioned in your book, the great thing about Popcorn is that it's paying homage. It's a slasher movie, so it feels of the 80s, but it's also paying homage to like the William Castle 50s horror movies, where it was an event to go see the movie and all this stuff would happen in the theater, whether your seat was getting zapped by the tingler or there was smell-o-vision and all that great stuff going on, because the whole plot of the movie revolves around these students that are basically holding like this movie marathon in a theater that's going to be demolished in a few weeks. And as they're doing this to raise some money and whatnot, weird stuff starts to happen. And maybe parts of the movies are coming to life in deadly fashion. There's a killer on the loose who's murdering these students in very inventive ways, kind of tied to these movies that are these fake movies that were made for popcorn that are also playing. So like the movies within the movie. So there's just a lot of great stuff going on, but at the same time, it's kind of like a 50s, 80s hybrid movie that was released in the early 90s. But I love it though. I love it for a lot of the reasons you write about in the book, just that it is a celebration of cinema. It kind of reminds me, if I'm going to throw a Disney Channel original movie reference, it reminds me of like Phantom of the Megaplex, where it's like, it's a horror movie, but it's also just celebrating the movie going experience. And it's got some great kills in it too. And it does the job. It is legitimately scary in quite a few parts too. So I think it's both fun, but frightening, and some great actors in there too in this one.
I also very much appreciate, like the, slight spoiler territory, like the supernatural red herring that then pivots into like science fiction almost in terms of how this is happening. I do feel like they were playing a little fast and loose with exactly how like the faking the supernatural elements went. But I think that's kind of like, you're just kind of on for the ride in a movie like this. And honestly, like when we talked about it feeling, like an 80s movie, before I looked it up before tonight, I would have bet like $1 million that this was 89. I had it in my head that this movie was from 89. But yeah, and it has that late 80s feel. Also the director, Mark Harrier, another connection to both the 80s and to Canada. You might know him as Billy from the Porky's movies. Probably
That is
like
amazing.
maybe like the prototype of the teen sex comedy from the early 80s.
Yeah, yeah. Alan Ormsby, who he directed the movies within the movies. He was also directing the actual the regular part of the movie, but he got uh thrown off the project, I believe. And yeah, Harrier ended up finishing the movie. You wouldn't really know that there was any kind of trouble. I don't think it plays pretty smooth. And I
mean,
think it has. Sorry, go ahead.
I feel like any of the all over the place feel to it was always going to be there. Like I don't think it
Yeah,
doesn't
just by
have
nature of the material. Yeah.
it doesn't have that sense of like different people's fingerprints on it. It's just a very scattered movie, like just inherently.
Yeah,
Very ambitious.
and yet the the main plot line of the, I mean, yeah, spoiler alert again, this movie's over 30 years old now. Folks, I'm sorry if you haven't seen Popcorn yet, but our killer, I think that is handled very well and given a lot of he's given a lot of chance to explain his actions, and it makes sense when he, at least it makes sense to him. So I kind of like that. And look at me, I'm not even spoiling who the killer is. The person who plays the killer is very good as the killer in a very much opposite way of how this actor normally appears in film and his persona. I'll say that.
Yeah, they did a good job at casting this one in terms of casting against type. And he does a really good job with it. Like the whole scene, there's this whole scene playing out where one of the characters, he's the killer at this point. One of the characters is like professing their love for him. And he has like this whole scene where he goes to another room and he's talking to himself manically about how like this ruins all of my plans. Like this has I have all these things lined up and now this person is in love with me. I don't know how to handle that. Like it's that's so like emblematic of this movie. It is because he doesn't stop killing people, so it is very funny. It's got some heart, but it's also like it doesn't forget that it's a horror movie too.
Yeah, there's a good balance there. I feel like it's, and it does get as like lighthearted as it is at times. I think, Scott, you mentioned that there's like a full on let's clean the theater montage. It's a very like,
oh yeah,
Full House sitcom style cleanup kind of thing. It's like, wow, they really, they don't hold back with some of the kills in this one, including, if I remember right, there's like an explosive kind of bathroom toilet scene that goes on. There's just a lot of like great cinematic kills in this one, as far as how he's tying in like cinema with how he's murdering these people. And it's, it's a pretty likable group of characters too. So it's kind of, they're more likable than other horror movies, as far as like how they kind of build up these characters and their chemistry and everything. So there's some good empathy there to as you're watching it. And also too, I was curious, Scott, because this I know this movie was filmed in Jamaica, and I believe you did live in Jamaica for a time. So was there like, when you saw this movie, did you have that connection to it, or did you know that when you originally saw it?
Oh, I mean, there's no, I didn't know, but I did see this in the theater when it came out. A friend and I went and saw it, and as I watched the movie, I could tell right away that it was Jamaican. Then it was solidified for me when the reggae band decides to is playing at the movie theater. They just start playing when they lose power. That's when they decide they're going to entertain the crowd, which I'm not sure how that works without the power. But again, these are little things you don't think about when you're watching the movie. Yeah, I knew watching the movie, I could tell that it was filmed in Jamaica. That was kind of an 80s, again, that was kind of like an 80s thing, a 70s, was 60s through the 90s, really. Film over there, they probably got great tax breaks, etc., right? You get a vacation. Dr. No was filmed close to where I lived, that kind of thing. So and the type of movie theater that movie theater was kind of similar to the movie theater in my town. That one was in Kingston, which is like the capital city of Jamaica. We were up in the mountains more, but same kind of theater, definitely, for sure. So yeah, I snuck a 90s movie. I was so religiously against doing it when I was doing Drive-In Dust-Offs weekly. There's no way I would do a 90s movie like I would do. I would go up to 89 and that would be
December 31st, 1989. That's it.
But this I thought, you know what? This is a book. This is a little different. Let's stretch it and put it in there anyway. And then I think it was when we came up with the subtitle of 1950s to 1980s. But whatever. Thanks for pointing it out, Bryan.
Well, what am I if not a actually gatekeeping douchebag? Yes. that is our final movie in our Cut Below festival. So a reminder, folks, buy this fucking book. It's real good. And we still don't have an exact release date yet, but pre-orders are up anywhere you buy books. So
yes,
you can find it anywhere. Scott, do you have any final thoughts or final notes you want to make about A Cut Below?
It feels like this has been going on forever sometimes. And you shake yourself, and then you become wide awake, and you realize maybe it's been going on forever, but it's almost here, so I think we're just getting started with this. So my excitement levels, they may seem not at the highest at the moment, but trust me, I am I'm reserving some of my mega energy for the long stretch of promoting this book. No, it's the journey's just beginning, right? The book will be out in the next couple months, and then I'm going to go wherever anyone will have me to happily talk about it. So
awesome.
That's where we are.
Well, that's going to bring us to the end of the show. We want to thank Bryan, our engineer, for helping us out each and every episode. And as always, we want to thank you, our listeners, including those of you who have signed up for a Corpse Club membership. Make sure to visit us at corpseclub.com. Check out our latest episodes. Don't forget to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. Every rating and review helps us out. You can also find us on Google Play, SoundCloud, and all your favorite podcast providers. If you want to get in contact with us, you can reach us at any time, contact@corpseclub.com, or on Twitter @DailyDeadNews, or @Corpse Club, and on Instagram and Facebook under Corpse Club. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, stay scary.